Welcome to the Burisch Archive Podcasts, a series of focused discussion around the controversial claims of Dr. Dan Burisch. Today's subject, Project Aquarius.
We're jumping straight into the deep end today. We're talking about what our sources allege is the ultimate shadow organization.
Right. This is the high-level infrastructure that supposedly govern all the major UFO and extraterrestrial research at the infamous S4 facility.
Located at Papoose Mountain, right near Area 51. So this is our deep dive into Project Aquarius.
It's the umbrella, isn't it? If we really want to understand the mechanics of the S4 research, the J-Rods, the timeline paradoxes, we have to start here.
You have to.
So our mission today is really to unpack Aquarius, or AQ, and figure out what this organization was designed to manage. Because it was allegedly much bigger than just recovering crashed saucers.
Oh, much bigger. Exactly.
Yeah.
When we talk about Aquarius, we're talking about the group allegedly responsible for classifying and managing the entire extraterrestrial presence.
Since when?
Since at least 1947, right after the first major incidents. It operated under a classification level so extreme that the source material calls it cosmic magic.
Cosmic magic. I mean, just that name alone suggests a level of secrecy that is far beyond top secret.
It's a whole different ballgame.
It implies they're dealing with things so fundamentally disruptive to society that even knowing it exists is considered a catastrophe.
It's not just a government project. You have to think of it more like an institutional response to contact. The sources suggest AQ was the administrative backbone.
The backbone built to manage the logistics, the science, and the political realities of having contact with non-human intelligence, or in this case, non-contemporary human intelligence.
That's the key distinction right there.
Okay, so let's unpack the infrastructure needed for secrecy on this kind of scale. If Project Aquarius is dealing with future humans and time paradoxes, this place can't operate like a standard military base.
You've hit on the core problem they had to solve. The physical environment, the security protocols, they all had to match the stakes. The S4 facility, where a lot of this research happened, allegedly operated like a separate country.
A separate country?
Yeah. It wasn't bound by typical U.S. laws or even standard military regulations. It was, for all intents and purposes, autonomous, almost invisible to any outside oversight.
That immediately brings up a ton of questions about just getting people to work. How do you move hundreds of specialized scientists and security teams into a black site every day and not have anyone notice?
Well, the logistics were part of the secrecy itself. It was all about compartmentalization. Personnel would fly out of the Janet terminal at McCarran Airport in Vegas.
The famous unmarked airline that flies contractors to Area 51.
The very same. But for S4 clearance, it was another step. Transportation involved tone codes for ID verification, and then a transfer to either specialized choppers or completely blacked-out vans for the final trip to Papoose Mountain.
It sounds less like a commute and more like launching into orbit. And speaking of that, the actual work environment had to deal with biological containment for these entities, right?
That's a crucial detail people often miss.
Yeah.
S4 wasn't just secure, it was biologically sealed. It was a certified biosafety level 4 facility. A BSL-4.
BSL-4. And just so everyone's on the same page, that is the absolute highest level of biocontainment there is. It's for things like Ebola, untreatable airborne agents.
Precisely. So if you were interacting directly with these extraterrestrial biological entities, the EBEs, especially the J-Rods, you weren't wearing a lab coat.
Yeah.
You were in a highly pressurized, full space type suit with its own cooling system. And that really underscores two things. First, the very real biohazard threat, perceived or actual. And second, the delicate non-Earth atmosphere needed for the J-Rod's clean sphere.
You know, what I find really disturbing about all this is that the secrecy wasn't just pointed outwards, it was weaponized internally against the actual scientists trying to solve the problem.
That is the ultimate example of how deep the compartmentalization went under Aquarius. The scientists on the floor, the ones doing the complex medical procedures, they'd write their technical reports. But before those reports went up the chain of command.
To the Majestic group.
Right. They were intercepted by what the forces call a cover committee.
A cover committee? You mean they were actively sanitizing the data, editing what their own researchers found?
Absolutely. The committee would excise information, they'd modify it, sometimes they'd just delete parts they thought were too sensitive or revealed too much of the big picture. The working group members, the people doing the research day in and day out, never saw the final report of their own work.
So they were kept in the dark on purpose?
Completely. They were purposely kept from understanding the ultimate goals and, the real implications of Project Aquarius.
So the scientists were basically the blind men touching an elephant, each one an expert on their tiny piece, but completely unable to see the terrifying whole.
And that brings us right to the central mission of Aquarius, which really revolved around the J-Rods. They were given specific identifiers, J numbers, K numbers, in the archives.
The sources are so specific about who the J-Rods are, they're classified as EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities, but we're told they're not aliens. Not in the way we think of them. We should probably clarify that paradox.
It's the most crucial and, frankly, the most chilling distinction. J-Rods are future human beings. They're allegedly our descendants who evolved after a catastrophic timeline paradox.
A catastrophe caused by misusing technology and splitting the timeline.
Exactly. So Aquarius wasn't just studying visitors from another planet. They were studying the tragic physical failure of our own species.
That puts a completely different weight on the whole project.
It really does. The main subject of their medical research, the J-Rod named Kaela, was kept in that high-pressure clean sphere we mentioned. And to keep this being alive, they needed a very specific, very strange atmosphere.
Which was?
4% hydrogen and slightly less oxygen than our standard air.
Why that specific mix? Was it just a preference?
No, it ties directly to their evolution. After this predicted catastrophe, the part of humanity that became the J-Rods went underground to survive. They adapted over millennia to a subterranean high-pressure world. That 4% hydrogen was critical to stabilize their biological systems. They were incredibly fragile.
And the research itself wasn't about time travel theory, was it? It was highly specialized medicine. This is where the jargon gets a little dense.
It really does. The core agenda was trying to diagnose and hopefully treat a very severe medical issue affecting the J-Rod. The condition was described as it's a mouthful, a paraprotein-related monoclonal gammopathy of uncertain significance type disorder.
Whoa, okay, stop right there. That sounds like something straight out of a medical journal. In plain English, what was actually wrong with them?
To put it simply, it was a complex neuropathy, a breakdown of the neurological system. It caused severe progressive muscle atrophy. That's why they were often hunched, so frail. Their central nervous system was failing. They were in a lot of pain.
And that explains the BSL-4 suits and the intense containment. They weren't just watching them, they were doing invasive medical procedures.
Incredibly invasive and demanding work. It involved taking nearly 300 individualized aspiration samples directly from the J-Rod's neurological system.
300?
All in an attempt to find a cure. This was all formalized under a sub-project called AQJR1, which was focused on genomics specifically, genetic translocations, and the fact that J-Rods had significantly fewer chromosomes than we do.
So you have this picture of human scientists in these big suits doing delicate surgery on their own future tragic descendants. The big question that hangs over all of Aquarius is, why? Was this mission truly altruistic? Were they just trying to save them?
The scientists on the floor, I think they were driven by compassion, but the sources suggest the high-level command, the Majestic group, had a much more utilitarian goal. The real purpose of the J-Rod project was to understand evolutionary pathways.
So by studying the J-Rod's failure,
by studying their painful evolutionary split, they were getting critical knowledge to steer our humanity away from that same fate. They were, in essence, leveraging the J-Rod's suffering for our benefit.
that makes the J-Rod more than a patient. It makes them a walking, breathing cautionary tale.
And Aquarius was huge. The J-Rod medical research was just one piece of the puzzle. There were two other major, highly compartmentalized projects running at the same time.
Okay, let's start with the one that ties back to the J-Rods, the biological side of things. Project Rain Dancer.
Rain Dancer was a deeply secret project. It used biological research from the J-Rods, but it was aimed at something radical. The agenda was, and I'm quoting here, attempting the unattainable, an aerosolized inoculation.
An aerosolized inoculation. That sounds like they weren't trying to treat just one person, but maybe the whole population?
It suggests they were looking for a way to rapidly influence or protect a massive population from some kind of threat, maybe a biological threat, or an evolutionary one tied to what happened to the J-Rods. It's a huge, high-stakes concept.
Then the second project takes us into some really out-there physics and tech. Project Lotus and the Ganesha particle. It sounds almost mystical.
The Lotus research is fascinating. It deals with something described as a fundamental electromagnetic substance, the Ganesha particles, or GPs. These GPs were said to be able to repair damaged cells, provide incredible healing, and potentially even grant immortality.
Okay, so you're moving from medicine into something close to mythology. How does a black budget lab even begin to study an immortality particle? What did the experiments actually look like?
They were trying to manipulate these particles by opening micro-wormholes, tiny little portals. The Lotus research involved creating these incredibly small openings, from 20 microns up to a millimeter, on the surface of quartz crystals.
What happens when you open a tiny portal in a lab? Did things just vanish?
No, something much stranger happened. The results were anomalous and they were biological. During the experiments, they unexpectedly saw self-organizing cells start to form. These cells, when they put them in a nutrient medium, look like complex neurons.
Wait a minute. So they open a tiny wormhole and life just spontaneously starts to organize itself. That's way beyond fixing a nervous system. That's getting into the realm of actual creation.
And that's what connected all this practical research back to the theoretical foundation of Aquarius, the DCTP, the convergent timeline paradox.
The DCTP is the glue holding this all together, isn't it?
Yeah.
It explains why the J-Rods are here, why these projects even exist. So how does this convergent timeline paradox actually work?
The theory is that when future humans perfected time travel, they didn't just create a nice, neat parallel history. Their actions caused a massive split in time. And instead of separating cleanly, the consequences of their future mistakes, the J-Rods, their disease, the catastrophe, were all superimposed back onto our present timeline.
So we're not just looking at a possible future, we are living in the consequences of it right now. The J-Rods are a living, breathing symptom of that paradox.
And that is the absolute core reason for the frantic secrecy and the immense resources poured into Project Aquarius. The stakes were, by every account, existential for everyone.
So let's connect all this extreme research back to us, to the listener's world. What was this catastrophe that Aquarius was so desperate to prevent?
The whole effort was aimed at stopping a very specific event on the timeline centered around December 21st, 2012. The sources suggest that date was important because Earth was predicted to cross the galactic plane, which is a dense natural network of wormholes.
And when that happens, the threat wasn't something coming from outside. It was, again, us, our own technology failing us.
Absolutely. The top priority for Aquarius was to stop human-made time and wormhole machines, they call them ERB machines, from activating automatically during that galactic crossing. The fear was that these machines, triggered by the natural cosmic energy, would direct too much energy at Earth and cause the disaster, the one the J-Rods already lived through.
The J-Rods are the literal physical result of our own future technological arrogance.
They're one possible future, yes. The source material says that after the catastrophe, one part of humanity went underground, focused on physics and time travel, and became the J-Rods. Another group, who supposedly took a higher moral course and rejected that tech, eventually became the beings known as the Orions.
So Project Aquarius becomes this secret, black budget attempt by humanity to get information from its own future children to save itself from its own inventions.
Exactly. But the knowledge they gained, from the healing of the Ganesha particles to the raw power of the Lotus portals, is incredibly dangerous. If it's misused, it just feeds the paradox all over again.
It's a double-edged sword.
It is. It offers a path to transcendence, maybe even the immortality they hinted at, but it also shows you the physical horror that's waiting if we fail to manage that power. Aquarius was the ultimate high-wire act.
And that's the key takeaway, isn't it? Project Aquarius wasn't just about hiding aliens. It was a vast, frantic government operation focused on hiding and fixing our own terrifying evolutionary failure, using technology they got from the victims of that failure.
So here's a final thought. Considering this focus on the conversion timeline and the risk from advanced human tech, like those ERB machines, how might our own small advances today in AI, quantum computing, deep physics, how might they be unknowingly contributing to the very paradox they were trying to stop? Something to think about.
Thank you for listening to the Burisch Archive Podcasts. Check back for further detailed analysis on other aspects of Dan's claims and their extraordinary connection to our current understanding of our relationship to the extraordinary.